Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we, a business owner and an artist, discuss the business of art and the art of business. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made.
And I'm Ross, creative director at Epic Made, and we're the hosts of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include Marcy Selsberg of Blah Blah Blah, Gage Mitchell of Modern Species and Evolve CPG, and Rebecca Blake of the Graphic Artists Guild.
We are forever grateful for the sponsors of our podcast, and as always, this episode is brought to you by the creative gurus at Epic Made. Epic Made is a collaborative expert, artists, and animators who help brands tell powerful and engaging stories. We've demonstrated our expertise in visual storytelling, fantasy pop culture, and detailed world building in collaboration with some of the biggest entertainment brands on planet Earth, including Sci-Fi, Nickelodeon, and TNT. Visit getepicmade.com and let's collaborate on your next creative campaign.
You did it.
Didn't mess it up this time.
Yeah, that's pretty consistently. So with us today, we have Adam Martin. He's an assistant director as well as the co-founder of Macroverse, which is a new media entertainment company with a focus on next-gen comics and digital storytelling, which you can experience on their Macroverse app. Welcome, Adam. Pleasure to have you.
So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, man. So before we jump in today, we have a few quick questions for you, Adam. So our audience can get to know you better. So how long have you been doing this and what brought you to your industry?
So I've been an assistant director for 25 years. I came in right after I graduated. I got a degree in physics and philosophy and was like, I just don't know what I'm doing with that. And my brother is much older than me and was came out of USC and was screenwriting and was like, look, come to LA. It's fun. And so I did and met my wife and stayed, basically. So that was
a great call.
Blundered into the film industry. And had the benefit of, like, my mom was a movie critic, so I was raised around movies and watching interesting, I saw Ingmar Bergman at the age of 7 or something, which was completely stupid and totally ruined it for me for a while. But it was just kind of part of the background, as it were. And then, worked as assistant director for years and loved, tons of great shows and interesting people and cool stuff. And you also hit that point, I think a lot of people do, where you realize I'm constantly making things for other people. I kind of want to make something for myself. And I met my partner and company co-founder, Evan Matthews, through mutual friends, and realized we kind of started writing together, realized that we enjoyed that, but weren't, that the chances of selling anything, even though we got some stuff optioned and that kind of thing, it was like, great, that's now going to sit in a hard drive for the next 20 years and then disappear. Wait, we both love comics. Why don't we do something cool in the comic space? We could then kind of produce something that we can produce comics from the ideas that we have that we want to get made. So it's at least people can kind of enjoy them. And so, but we also felt like, digital comics the future, but we don't like the PDF and the iPad comicsology thing. And so we invented this new kind of tap format for the phone, for enjoying comics on the phone. And then we felt like, well, wait, if other people we like this, other people probably will do too. And so it kind of grew out very organically from there. And so now we've got 100 creators we're dealing with. We've got 50 plus, different series up on the app, more coming in the whole time. And kind of expanding as we, expanding pretty consistently now.
Amazing. All right. So that leads into the next question. What's top of mind in your industry right now?
Top of mind. Look, I think the big elephant, right, is got to be AI,
right?
And especially in the artist. It's obviously a big thing for writers at the moment. I'm sure with the writers with the strike going on. So the Directors Guild just signed. As we kind of worked out an agreement and we just ratified that agreement. But I think it planted a stake in the ground in the AI world. But I think, for the time being, at least, we're less directly under threat than the writers are. So I understand lots of writer friends. I understand their concerns around that. So I think that's one side of it. And then art, obviously, on the other side, especially in the comic space. People are terrified, and justifiably so, about where this is going to go and what this is going to do, and how, and I do. If I was a mid-tier concept artist at this point, I would be deeply concerned.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, we actually had an episode about this with Rebecca Blake from the Graphic Artists Guild, and specifically about the legality of AI. And while I don't want that to be this whole episode, the long and short of it, the long and short of it is the current stance on copywriting it is very artist favorable. So like you actually can't copyright the output of AI art. So it makes it unusable by a production studio outside of just iterative sort of concept art. Like you can't generate something from Midjourney and then use that as the character design that's trademarkable or anything like that. So that does protect us a bit more as artists, as writers, because I feel like we're both writers as well to some degree.
Yep.
I don't know what the stance is as far as like ChatGPT or something like that, how that kind of information gets handled. So I could totally see that being a greater detriment to that industry, at least as it stands currently.
So I have these conversations every week because I'm on the board of the guild, and I'm on the advocacy committee. And what the law says right now is that human authorship is the key term in it, right? So because there isn't human authorship, and this we've tested this law in the past with people try to copyright works done by elephants, and like there was a monkey taking photographs. Those were not copyrightable because they were not human authors. So that's the hair they've been splitting at this point, and laws are crazy. But and then obviously I think Web3 is probably top of mind in your space, but it's a little we're in a bear market, but that's okay.
It's okay. That's, what, the people who are building in this current Web3 market, I think you're maybe the ones coming out strongly in the next 2 to 3 years. You know what I mean? So it's very much what we are.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that because we're doing that as well. So, so last intro question. Tell us about the project you're most proud of or most excited, like just something that's like, hey man, this was an awesome project. I want your audience to know about. So.
We got a couple. We produced a comic series for the Boondock Saints, that movie, the Boondock Saints, for the late 90s. So we produced a comic series. That was what led us back into comics. I mean, this is 10 years ago now. That was awesome. And we got to do it was this kind of bridge the gap between the two movies that were in production at that point. And we got to do the kind of Comic-Con circuits with Norman Reedus and Sean Patrick Flannery and Troy Duffy.
Fantastic.
And it was such a blast. It also illuminated the issues with the traditional comic market in a weird way, which would kind of steered us into the digital space. But that was super fun. And then we're actually doing a project right now with a Web3 project called The Wanderers, where it's a profile picture project. But what we do then is go into that community and we teach storytelling. And then the owners of different characters can pitch stories based on the characters that they have. And we're producing little 2-page comics based on their characters.
That's awesome.
And so it's super fun, and people who have never written before are coming up with these great, crazy ideas. And then the community votes, and the top 10 projects get greenlit into these little 2-page comics, right? So it's super exciting to watch people who have never created before help kind of steer them through that process, and then see these ideas come, and then see just the excitement in people. It's like, wow, shit, I made it. That's fucking fantastic. I'm going to get this little thing done. And you know what I mean? This makes me so happy. And so we just greenlit the 10 projects last week. We're pairing them up with artists as we speak. There are literally last night emails going to and fro with artists pitching on who they want and what they want. It's really fun. And that stuff just gets me excited.
Oh, yeah. It sounds really exciting. We've done a little something like that. We worked out a PFP ourselves. We're actually still we're in the final throes of it, like a 10K PFP, super cool. We're really excited about it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Company on it. And then we are part of a collective called the Crazy Carl Collective. I am personally a bunch of Web3 guys, but our our whole collection just got picked up by Yuga Labs and the 10K TF thing. So they've added it to there. And we spun up a little comic that almost no one knows about unless they listen to this podcast. But so we made a little 3-pager as well off of one. So exact same thing that you're saying, which is crazy because we bought some. Oh, it is 4 pages. I try to keep it down to 2, and we somehow
that is
so hard, right? 12 panels to tell a story. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, that sounds exciting. I know exactly this feeling all those people are having right now because it is really exciting. So
that's super cool. I'm so good. So you said, did you go and you own the characters that then you produce the story around, or you've went and acquired the characters to do that?
Yes, I bought the characters at Mint. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Russ. Yeah, and then I've been talking the whole time. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, well, it's ironic because it's sort of your story, but basically Carl picked up the character at Mint, and it's this samurai assassin character with all of these like glowing tattoos, and so we made this. Me and the team made this story about the character kind of in a very John Wick sort of fashion where he was out of the game and, something brings him back in and he's this epic assassin. And it's a really cool 4-page story with like a really great moral through line of like there's a difference between being helpless and being
peaceful.
Right, where you could defend yourself and your family, and you're choosing not to is a significantly more powerful stance to be in than being unable to do so and calling yourself peaceful.
Yes. And it's funny, I was listening to some speaker just this last week who was saying, the true power is not power. True power is having the ability to inflict violence, rage, whatever, and controlling it, and that is, and then but it's not simply the absence of that. It's
right.
Yeah,
and that could be a podcast episode in and of itself.
Yeah.
And but today, what I do think would be a really great discussion for all of us would be to discuss the power of storytelling in modern media. So kind of leads in a little bit from what we were talking about. But you've been doing so much work in storytelling. That's basically all Epic Made does is take client ideas and our own ideas and sort of visualize them into engaging stories, specifically that are driven by moral through lines or symbolic through lines for advertising and things like that. And so I wanted to kind of just create a discussion around demystifying the value of that. I feel like there is a bit of a stereotype, at least in more recent marketing, where it's got to be as efficient as possible and as quick as possible. And it removes a lot of the engaging storytelling opportunities because it feels like everything's got to go so fast and be so like straightforward.
Right.
My wife and I were actually watching we just randomly found it on YouTube while we were bored scrolling, and we were watching like this nostalgic commercial montage or collection compilation, and it's insane how prevalent that was when we were back in like the 90s or early 2000s, and how much it's been curbed. Like the Bionicle commercials. I don't know if you remember the Bionicle commercials.
I do. I mean, very vaguely, but yes. I mean, certainly.
They had full on like movie, like 3D Pixar level productions for these commercials. Like one of them was like 2 minutes long.
Right.
Yeah. So I just
right. It's some of that condensation that you're talking about, because it is funny, because you're totally right. Like I do remember those, and I think that when you're talking commercials specifically, I think it's when the value of the 30-second slot on network television is like, great, during this show, that slot is worth $500,000 or $1 million, or the peak of Friends, whatever, $5 million, right, for a 30-second slot. If you're the network, you want to make damn sure you're getting as many of those 30-second slots in there And if you're the advertisers, you know that 30 seconds actually means 29 because there's a bit of a... So like you've got to convey something so quickly. And yes, character gets lost in that incredibly fast. And I think it's been the benefit of the expansion, I think, of actually getting away from the shackles of the kind of broadcast media. You've got 30 minutes, which means that, you've got a 30-minute slot, which means 22 and a half minutes on air, including credits, including titles, which means you've got this much advertiser. So whereas now, I mean, I don't remember the last time the last few shows I've done as an assistant director, certainly there have been some time parameters around it, but it's like, oh, you're shooting an hour show. It can be as low as 48 minutes and it can be as high as like 66 minutes. Like, right. There was like anywhere in that range for an episode and you're fine because it's FX and it's streaming, and yeah, they'll put some ads in there, but it's not broken up in the same way. It's not, there's not the concern for that in the same way.
Because there's nothing that has to come after it. I think that's the biggest thing, is that
exactly.
they're all being viewed in silos. And so if you have an episode that's, like you said, 48 minutes or something like that, if there are 10 minutes of commercials in 5 slots, you could have, 2-minute commercials in each of them, and it wouldn't even really matter in the grand scheme.
Exactly. And that, I think it'll be, and I think that is the benefit of this. It allows more of a, fundamentally, you're saying it's about characters, right? It's about the audience relating to the characters they see on screen. And that can be in a commercial, or that could be in a program, or like us, those things. You want to feel that connection. So if you've got time to kind of build that out properly, I think just the advent of great television in general has probably impacted that, where it's, good. You've got 12 to 18 episodes for a season to explore a character. There's still something perfect to me about the movie, like the 2 hours, I'm going to get this complete story. And, I was rewatching The Godfather recently, and this is perfect filmmaking, right?
Yeah.
But there's also, it's a different beast from like, great, I just finally finished watching Breaking Bad. I was like immaculate filmmaking over
Absolutely.
5 seasons and 40 hours of, and it's just like, oh, this is a different beast, but it's that connection is still there. That connection.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Taking inspiration from Walter White.
Oh yeah. Exactly. Yeah. He has a reason for it. I lost my hair. I kind of figured out the same situation. And Ross, I just resent you, frankly. I just upset me. I'm not talking to you anymore.
He's been great since he was like 45.
I am significantly younger than my hair would suggest.
Yes.
Hair color would suggest. So.
Yeah. Well, it looks like a choice from here, so it looks great.
One of our. So I had a call with one of our artists at Epic Made, and she answered the call, and she's like, "Oh, you dyed your hair blonde." Like, oh, no.
No, it's the golden hour outside. Some nice sun coming in.
So ironically, though, so you mentioned that we do actually have significantly less time constraints. And ironically, though, people are still following advertising rules as though we have time constraints. And I think that kind of goes into we could take cues from the shows and media and things that we really like ingesting, like digesting, as far as watching a character evolve or change or something like that. And you can do that in a short form story. I mean, it's been done in advertising specifically, but and I don't want to stay on advertising forever. It's just kind of the first.
No, it's just
think of. And I feel like there is a confusion between engaging the audience in a story where they're willing to watch and getting all the information out so quickly, they don't realize that they've watched the whole ad by the time they're ready to click off. Right. And I feel like it's kind of similar to the remake, reboot kind of methodology of like, well, we don't want to do anything new because it's scary.
Yes.
We want to, we want to just do what works, which is just pump all the information out as quickly as possible rather than try to get an audience engaged in the culture of the ad or the culture of the product.
I feel like everyone is I think it's across industries. It's not unique to creative industry, right? But there's like every decision maker is trapped between the conflicting fears of, I'm going to say yes to something that's a failure, and I'm going to say no to something that's a success. And I'm terrified of both of those outcomes. So that means I don't do anything. I'm just going to keep doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's the trap that a lot of us get stuck in. It's like, how many times do you repeat the same things for fear of moving, right? Like, you make a decision and go for it. It's some Ross and I were just talking about the other day, because we're really niching down in some of our marketing now, and it's the same concept. So.
Yeah.
So I had a weird question. When you say you're assistant director, I'm sure Ross knows exactly what this means, but just for our audience, what does that mean specifically? What is assistant director versus what is it not?
Yeah. So assistant directors, it's a DGA position. So we are essentially the people that run the sets, the physical production side of a show. So, there's TV show, there's the showrunner who's the creator, and then there's the director and the cinematographer and the assistant director. And the three of us are the kind of triumvirate of, we're making the majority of the decisions. Here's what's happening. And then once we're into a day, here's logistics. And it's everything from, great, you're shooting a party scene. How big is the space? What's the food being served? How are we doing this? What are the people dressed as? Liaising with all the departments, making sure everyone knows what this party is in advance. And then when you get there on the day, it's great. What are the camera angles? Where are the actors? How are we blocking this thing? Working with the director and the cinematographer to make it effective and look good. And you're kind of, you're there a half an hour before call and an hour after wrap, just making sure everything's kind of working and moving in the right direction,
Okay.
And so it can be immensely fun. It can be incredibly good fun, especially when you get a good team going. And it's wonderful. Yeah.
Sure.
Do you have say in like the shot list and storyboard and things like that, or are you following that as a recipe to make sure that the physical production goes to plan?
Yeah. I mean, that honestly varies very much show to show and kind of director to director. I've been very lucky to have worked with very collaborative directors where they tend to be of the opinion like, hey, best idea wins and let's do this thing. I've certainly worked with other ones who are very much like, no, I know what I'm doing and this is the thing. And like, and it's like, great, we'll do that. We'll follow you. But I love it when I am involved and it's those early kind of pre-production conversations. And ideally, it's myself and the director of the DP, and we're just sitting in a room and we're looking at the scene and we're getting up and we're talking about it and we're kind of moving it through. And it's like, okay, I'll tend to approach a situation where, you schedule each day thinking, well, great, this scene will take 5 hours and this scene will take 2 hours and this maybe will take 1 hour. And even if we've talked through what we think the shots are, inevitably that evolves and that's all fine. But I know for myself, then I will always have, because I have directed as well, it's like I kind of know how to block a scene. I know I'll try and schedule like a simpler thing for the end of a day because I know, all right, if we get into trouble and we're 2 hours behind, I know we can do this scene and one setup with like super simple. It just finishes the day. It gets the words on the screen. It may not be the most inspired way of getting it on there, but at least we know we've got this scene and then we can figure out what else from there. So I tend to be quite involved with all that stuff. And then on the day, as we're watching a scene unfold or the blocking changes or whatever, I will also sometimes come and say, hey, that's either, we talked about that shot over here, but that doesn't make sense now given where they're moving, right? Like this feels like a wasted shot. And then conversely, the actor now turns this way instead of that. Do we think we want like a complementary angle on them for that beat? Or do you feel like that plays in the two shot? Yeah. So those kind of evolving conversations constantly through a day.
Absolutely.
Great fun.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Appreciate you getting into the weeds of that.
Yeah.
Always fun to put some more knowledge out there and all the cool creative jobs in the world. So love that.
What would you consider to be the greatest power of storytelling, like the greatest ability of like why you would even tell stories. Because I have some opinions on this, but I want to hear what you guys think.
That is a fantastic question. I mean, I think ultimately the greatest power of story, I think it is teaching it. Great storytelling can teach you things about yourself that you didn't realize, and give you access to emotions and thoughts and feelings that were previously outside of your kind of realm of experience, realm of knowledge, and not necessarily because of the desire, just because you didn't know those things necessarily existed, So I think, and I think like art in general, I think can be a kind of force for incredible strength and power in the world, and the power of storytelling is, can change lives, can move economic needles, can move societal needles, No, I think it can be a huge power. But what are I'm intrigued now. What's your answer to that?
Well, do you want to go, Ross, or me?
You go first, and I'll bookend it.
So my brain went a couple places, right? Like storytelling is like the crux of human culture, right? Like individual cultures are all defined around the stories they tell, and whether those are historical stories or legends or myths or some amalgamation of all that. And then I also go into this other thing that history is written by the victors, and those who tell the stories rule the world. So it's quite a powerful thing to, if you have the world captive with your stories, then you have the most influence, right? So I mean, I think Disney knows this, right? Like, so I don't know. That's just where the kind of cloud of ideas that spun around that question.
Yeah, more than anyone, I'm sure Disney knows. But yeah, so very similar to, I guess it's somewhat of an amalgamation of both ideas, but I heard this once, that storytelling teaches the audience how they should live through the lens of a particular scenario, right? So and it kind of goes into what you were saying, Adam, where it kind of teaches you something about yourself, whether you knew it or not, is sort of not necessarily prohibitive, right? Like you could understand this concept or not, but a good story, one that might even qualify as film, right? Or like a powerful short story or like a one-page comic can do this. But just the idea that the author of the story is sharing an experience and their opinion about a scenario and telling the audience how they should handle it through their lens. It's a way of teaching someone culture and experience, or it's a way of teaching someone a moral judgment call that is done in a way that is less abrasive, right? Because no one wants to hear "live this way." Right. You sort of are, as a human, you're sort of immediately abrasive to that, right? You're sort of immediately resistant to it. But if it's told through a story where you can now see both sides of the coin, like the consequence and benefit of living a certain way, then you can make a decision about how you would handle that yourself.
Right.
Breaking Bad is actually a great example of that, right? It's one of the greatest character narratives that I've ever seen. And this idea that, Walter White is making a decision about why he's doing this thing, and that changes as he learns more about his own motivations. And I don't want to, I guess, should I give stuff away? I don't want to, but I guess by the end of it's an old show. If you haven't,
it's an old. I was going to say, I'm just very late to the game. Yeah.
My wife hasn't seen it either. I actually tried to get her to watch it like 3 days ago, ironically.
I still haven't seen it, so
well, you're about to get a little bit of a spoiler. So it's basically he starts the show creating and selling this ridiculously high potency crystal meth because he sees it as a way to make a enormous fortune for his family before he dies of cancer. That's the premise of the show. Well, he uses this idea of I'm doing this for my family to justify a slew of just horrendous acts, right? Like
escalatingly horrendous acts. Yes.
I mean, down like it starts with like accidentally killing someone and figuring out that he can't get caught, so he boils them in acid. Like, so like that's the line in like episode 3 out of a 5-season show, just to give you context. And so by the end of the show, he kind of comes to this realization that like he's been spitting this narrative over and over and over again that he's doing this for his family. And when he's finally confronted by someone close to him, I think it's his wife or ex-wife at the time, he's like, yeah, you know what? I did this for me. He's like, I did this because I'm good at it and I liked it and I enjoy the power and it made me feel more of a man, and I was completely useless when I started this journey. I felt emasculated and useless, and now I'm a fucking god. Among the people in this city, the state, industry, etc. I'm the boogeyman, basically.
Oh, wow.
And the idea, I feel like a normal person could easily fall into that trap and not ever realize that. Right? Like,
sure.
That
Yes.
They're doing the wrong thing for the wrong reason, justified as the right reason. Pretending that it's the right reason. I think if you take stories and kind of internalize them through the message they're trying to send, that's where real change can happen inside of a person, where they can use it as a storytelling crux of their own personality and choices and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So we just need all our world government leaders to watch this show and get that story, yeah?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, seriously. No, I think you're very right. And it is, I think that's the reason, I mean, there's that fundamental thing that every writer starts with, which is like, write what you know, which only realistically takes you so far. But I think, there's an underpinning to that, which is, well, I can appreciate feeling, like you say, feeling emasculated, feeling powerless, feeling ambitious, but not knowing how to do that. And like, great, what does that emotion look like if it's corrupted, if it's taken, that's, hugely.
Yeah. I think taking the right with that core advice that kind of gets parroted and shifted a little bit to write what you believe, right? Where you don't necessarily have to have experienced it.
Oh, yeah.
You just have to have a definitive, specific opinion about this thing that you're going to be writing about. And it doesn't even have to be unique. That's another myth in storytelling, is like this idea of this down on his luck sort of second tier person rising up and becoming the villain because he's tired of taking shit from everybody. Like that's not a new story.
Right.
That kind of story has been told by the Greeks.
Yeah.
And so when you tell it through a very particular lens with very particular opinions about it, you create something that someone hasn't seen before and it becomes original. Right. Whereas the idea of coming up with something that no one has ever done before seems daunting unless you put it through that sort of lens.
Yeah, and I think that's the lens is the crucial. That's the crucial word in that position, right? It's like, what is the unique lens that I am bringing to this situation? Because stories are. There's certainly arguments have been made. It's the same story. The stories are just the same 3 types retold again and again and again through different lenses, right? But that just, that doesn't mean that you don't have a unique perspective and a unique something to tell within that. It also does definitely, it puts the chat GPT of it all into a slightly interesting context where like, it's fine to draw inspiration. Like we'll all go and watch movies and we'll read books and we'll look at art and we'll do whatever in order to draw inspiration to create something new. But if it's happening automatically, well, that's bad. But that's, you know what I mean? I mean, it becomes this slightly interesting moral gray area around AI and the sourcing of the how it goes about doing its business. And I think there is a distinction there, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
I think it's limited, right? I think ChatGPT is not going to come up with the level of uniqueness that a human's brain will, because it's not, it can't innovate, right? It can combine things and take samplings and reconfigure stuff that already exists. But I don't think, at least in my limited understanding of it, that it can really innovate like a human being can. So I think the ideas, the people with the best ideas, are still going to do quite well in this ecosystem. And I think using ChatGPT and Midjourneys of the world and all these AI software to draw inspiration from is just going to help us be more creative faster. That's my thing.
I think you're right. I think they both become another tool in creatives' arsenals. They become a thing that you can use. And if they become a crutch, well, that's a problem. And if it become a replacement, well, that's a huge problem. But like my partner and I, Evan and I have used ChatGPT for we're kind of breaking a new story. We got this idea, all right, let's feed in some stuff for ChatGPT because it'll give you, like you say, the most basic, simple, obvious answer. Then it's great. Any of these beats, we're not going to do any of those. Good. Okay, now we know what the obvious thing is because of this mechanized pro thing. Let's go do something totally different, and hopefully it'll be interesting and original.
Yeah. Whatever way you take the inspiration, right? That makes sense.
There's two. So I've kind of, I don't want to say I've mastered Midjourney, but I had a deep dive of Midjourney when it first arose, and I've kind of kept a thumb on it so that I'm not left behind. And I've recently shifted to ChatGPT because I'm basically just trying to get ahead of the technology because I'm a firm believer of using it as part of the process.
Yes,
not as a replacement, right?
Yep.
And I don't even want it to generate ideas that are the core concept, because I think that's equally problematic. It's arguably a replacement of you're arguably replacing yourself at that point.
Yeah.
But I think there are two core usages for it in storytelling specifically. There's 1,000,001 usages for it in practicality, but in storytelling, I think I've boiled it down to two things that I feel like are really helpful with ChatGPT. And the first one is very practical, is as creatives, I'm sort of speaking for everyone at this point, but specifically myself, I am so caught up in the minutia of it and also the innovation of a new idea or how to flesh out a story and how to do it in the most exciting and inventive way possible. A lot of the time you write yourself into a corner by having all of these really extravagant hoops to jump through that you've created for yourself. And I found that ChatGPT is remarkably good at creating a simple solution that you just are incapable of thinking of because you're so in it as a creator, right? There's so many times where I'm like, hey, this is this scene or whatever. I don't know how the character gets out of the situation. And then ChatGPT will come up with, hey, why don't they just do this? And I'm like, why don't they just do that? Yeah, that's right. Because it's a logic machine, right? It's there to be analytical. It's not there to be creative. And sometimes you just need assistance in giving you the logical answer because a lot of us have a tendency to get very, head in the clouds type way about our stories.
Yeah. Well, especially if you follow the thing of just great, put your protagonist in a situation where, and then just stack the deck against them frantically. And then suddenly realize, oh, dear God, no, that's kind of the leaning tower of Pisa looming over them and about to squash them. And yes, that's great. That's really funny. I hadn't thought of using ChatGPT in that way at all. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's the first way. And then the second way is very similar to what you mentioned, Adam, how you guys used it, where it's basically, ChatGPT is great at not only organization of information. So you can basically say, hey, this is my story. These are all the story beats. These are the characters and what they believe in and so on and so forth. And it can just consolidate the crap out of it in a way charts and all sorts of stuff if you know how to talk to it.
Right.
There's all sorts of organization it can do for you and consolidation of an idea. Carl and I tend to speak with $18 words most of the time.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT is great for helping to consolidate those things and sentences into really concise, pitchable terms.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also
call them 100K in student loan debt terms.
But also the if you feed it the moral core of what you're trying to do, and you give it all of the lay term answers that it needs to work within, lay term parameters that it needs to work within, it can actually build you a story that is halfway decent based around your own experiences, as long as you can articulate it right. And I think that is the most, I think that's going to be the highest tier usage of it in the industry eventually, is you're going to get directors or showrunners or whoever having all of their ideas filtered into this thing, and it creates a bare bones skeleton for them that they then take and say, okay, well, I don't like this. I don't like this. I do like this. Let's escalate this. And they put their own expertise on top of a skeleton. They no longer have to expend creativity and energy working out.
Yeah. No, I think you're probably right, but I think that's also part of what I think the studios especially are kind of leaning in that direction. And I think that's certainly, talking to writer friends, that's part of what they're very nervous about with the ChatGPT of it all is, well, great, now you can pay a showrunner to write a pilot and they'll use whatever their process is. But then you can feed that pilot in the ChatGPT and say, give us 8 scripts for this TV show with these different prompts. And now you're paying a showrunner and 2 writers for a month rewriting these scripts to feed this machine, as opposed to a showrunner who writes the pilot, great, but then a room full of 6 to 10 writers thinking and working through stuff and getting the kind of human experience, nitty gritty, weird, quirky,
Well, that's
what it would be interesting. Yeah.
I think it's a myth that it's capable of doing that, right? Like it might eventually be, but what I'm talking about is a core skeleton, right? The Marvel timeline core skeleton of the show, that you would then still need to, I don't think it can write dialogue in a way that is convincing and has a whole through line and subtext and all the things you would need. Like that, I think what it does is it speeds up the more staple processes of writing, and it's hey, these beats need to be aligned in this sort of way, and this if I have this kind of character who I want to go through this thing, here are some examples of how they get from A to B. I think it can be used as a Pinterest board, for writers, right?
Yeah. You still want that whole team of 6 in there making it even better, right? At least that's what I think.
Yeah, it needs to be written by people, no matter how you go about it. But I think it allows a director or showrunner to better convey the ideas in their head quickly without the dialogue elements, without that sort of stuff that they would still need writers for. I don't think infringes too much on a writer's actual skill, which is making the proper scenes with subtext and moral through line and storytelling narrative through line and things like that.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it comes down to it has the potential to be another useful tool when used intelligently by intelligent, in an arrogant way. I just mean creatively smart people and
being used by good actors, not bad actors.
Exactly.
In the morals.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Yes, that's the better way of putting it.
I think, optimistically, we hope that the good actors will produce better quality stuff than the people who don't do that, right? And I think that we'll see that for sure. So
Yeah.
So we are close to time. So I do want to have one last question for you, Adam. Before we ask it, we want to point people to your website at macroverse.world. That's correct?
Perfect. Yep.
Macroverse, VERSE.world, not .com.
And actually, if I can, if your listeners would like it, we have a free month offer on the app. So if you go to macroverse.world/free month, there's instructions on there for iOS or Android to download the app and grab a free month. And if you like it, great. If you don't, appreciate you checking it out. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
So we like to have our guests kind of spread the love and shout out, either a favorite podcast, an inspiration, people they love that they worked with, so on and so forth. Do you have anyone in mind who you want to shout out based on your career and your wealth of knowledge? We'd love to hear where some of your stuff got inspired.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the fun, the joy of being an AD assistant director for so long is just the sheer number of people that I've got to work with are incredibly talented, which has been just continues to be a source of inspiration. Like thinking like, hey, I'm approaching the situation. How would this person approach this? How do I tell this more interestingly? Like, just great. I think podcast wise, I've got, the script notes is just one of my favorite kind of mandatory listening. I think for anyone who's interested in screenwriting at all, like I just consistently find there are interesting conversations to nuggets of brilliance that are like, oh wait, that's a semester worth of screenwriting education you just got in like an hour. Like that's amazing. A friend of mine, Paul Shear, does a show called How Did This Get Made? Which is a movie analysis podcast, as it were, where they take movies of varying degrees of excellence and then kind of pull them apart and talk about them. And it's him and his wife, June Diana Refill, and Jason Mantzoukas, and it's delight. It's just one of my favorite things to listen to because they're so good together. So those two I just love. And then for people, it's I don't know, just so many. The last little bit, it's getting to work with. I did Dave, season 2 of Dave a couple of years back. That was amazing. I did season 3 of Barry last year. Like working that was amazing. Like working with both Bill Hader and Alec Berg on that. Just absolutely brilliant every step of the way. It's rare that I feel like I'm learning stuff consistently at this point. There's always things will come up where you're like, oh wait, I hadn't thought about that. That's kind of cool. I didn't really know. Like with those two, almost every day I'd be like, oh crap, yeah, that's amazing. So Alec is just a genius. He did Silicon Valley for 7 years before that and started in Seinfeld. Like he's brilliant. And then Bill Hader is incredibly smart and just with a lot of comedians, he's one of the funniest people I've ever worked with, an incredibly sharp filmmaker as well, and just great. So yeah, got to shout out that. That's incredible. Yeah,
absolutely, man. Yeah, love to have them on the podcast. That'd be awesome. Right. Sure. We really, really appreciate that, Adam, and I'm sure that the shout outs will not go unnoticed. I'm definitely going to check out those podcasts that you mentioned. Yeah, I'm Tyler Mowry is a screenwriting YouTuber that I listen to quite a bit. He breaks down a lot of he has each episode is kind of like a core element of story that he kind of breaks down, and it's very interesting. He cites about like a ton of books like Save the Cat and so on and so forth, but he also kind of has a lot of his own opinions on what he thinks is correct in those books and what he doesn't, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then A Closer Look is another really good YouTube channel that does video essay analysis for not movies, but like elements in movies, like how to do a good magic system, or how to write a good villain, or how to and they're like 2-hour videos, like they're almost their own podcast.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you know the YouTube series Every Frame a Painting? Have you seen that?
No.
So it's funny because it sounds similar to the second one that you were just talking about. They're like shorter videos. They're 7 or 8 minutes, but they'll look at a specific element of like, all right, we're going to look at shot, counter shot in the Coen brothers movies. Like, what does that mean? Here's this thing. We're going to look at, we'll look at interrogation scenes. They look at the Silence of the Lambs with Jodie Foster meeting Anthony Hopkins for the first time. And then they'll look at like action filmmaking, like Bayhem. We're going to look at Michael Bay movies. Why does his action look as good as it does? Well, here's why. And like they'll just take, and it's very digestible, but super smart filmmaking.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm out.
Really awesome. Well, a big thank you to Rise25 for introducing us to you and connecting us, and then then John for suggesting that you should be on this podcast. So,
John is my lifelong best friend, and he also worked with us at Epic Made. And one of his favorite movies of all time is Boondock Saints, which is hilarious.
Oh, that's great! Yeah,
yeah. So when you said that, I was like, oh man, I wonder if he knows.
He's gonna know soon.
Yes. No, John, we had a great chat. It was just like, Geeks Unite was the final thing, I think. Yeah.
I love it. Cool. Well, we've been talking with Adam Martin, who is the assistant director, who is an assistant director. Yeah. And co-founder of Macroverse. If listeners want to follow up you directly, Adam, where should they go?
Macroverse at Macroverse HQ. Or actually now just at Macroverse on Twitter, Macroverse HQ on the others. It's, just all our stuff is in there.
Great. All right, Adam, thanks so much for being on the show. And till next time, everyone, bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for having me.
We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.